I was the maidservant of the crown prince during his days of destitution, accompanying him as we endured 10 bitter years in the cold palace. He once said that if he ascended the throne, he would certainly make me empress. Yet later he said, if I were to make you a consort, I would have to turn over a plaque to see you. I wish to see you every day. So I could only continue serving as a maidservant, watching him favor the empress today, and grace the noble consort tomorrow. I was weary. So when he asked me what reward I desired for my birthday this year, I said calmly, this servant wishes to leave the palace. In the dead silence, Xiao Jingyuan looked at me in astonishment. What did you say? Before I could answer, standing respectfully to the side, Eunuch Lu hurriedly spoke. Miss Ji Wei, have you grown so overjoyed that you're talking nonsense? As he tried to smooth things over for me, he kept signaling me with his eyes. Regrettably, I was about to disappoint his kindness. I knelt and kowtowed, repeating word for word. This servant wishes to leave the palace. Ancient Storytime Ancient Channel. Hope you like my stories. Please like and subscribe. Xiao Jingyuan frowned. Why? I thought for a long time, thinking of many things. For instance, that rainy night half a month ago, the noble consort feared thunder most of all. After being startled awake, she came to Qinhe Palace in tears. Xiao Jingyuan held her, soothing her in a gentle voice. Don't be afraid, my beloved. I am here. I stood outside the bed curtains, wearing only a thin layer of clothing, having hastily made room for the noble consort. After a long while, the noble consort stifled her sobbing. Your concubine is afraid. May I stay here tonight? Xiao Jingyuan glanced at me, hesitated for a moment, but finally agreed amidst the noble consort's shaking. Naturally, at this moment, the noble consort seemed to finally notice my existence and pointed at me. Your Majesty, when I am resting, I do not like to have anyone by my side. My gaze fell upon her slender, jade-green fingers, then I lowered my head. What came into view was a pair of scarred and rough hands. Those are traces left behind by years of hard work. Xiao Jingyuan's gaze fell upon the noble consort's lovely face. Xiao Jingyuan's gaze fell upon the noble consort's lovely face. He said casually, Ji Wei, you may withdraw first. I watched the two embracing inside the tent, my whole body turning ice cold. I watched the two embracing inside the tent, my whole body turning ice cold. Xiao Jingyuan seemed to have forgotten his promise to me that he would not summon concubines to Qinhe Palace. He said Qinhe Palace was my sleeping quarters, and the dragon bed was my bed. He wanted me to stay by his side with peace of mind. Now, only 5 years have passed. I stood there in a daze for a long while, until the noble consort's impatient gaze swept over me. Only then did I come back to my senses, and I stiffly made my way to the room of Qiuyu, another senior palace maid. She was quite surprised to see me. Sister Ji Wei? I forced a smile. The noble consort is afraid of thunder, so she is staying overnight in Qinhe Palace. I still remember vividly the look of pity in Qiuyu's eyes back then. Song Ji Wei, speak to us. Xiao Jingyuan's impatient voice brought my thoughts back. I had thought so much, yet in the end I merely said calmly, this servant is 25 this year and has long reached the age to leave the palace. I beg your majesty to grant your permission. Xiao Jingyuan's face instantly darkened. Do you really want to leave? He had been on the throne for many years, and his authority had grown steadily. Eunuch Lu could not help but tremble uncontrollably. Yet I kept my back perfectly straight. It is true. I entered the palace at 10, and 15 years have passed since then. The best years of my life have been devoted to these palace walls, and to Xiao Jingyuan. Is that still not enough? I am too tired. Xiao Jingyuan was furious. After uttering the word good 3 times in succession, he flicked his sleeves and stormed off. If you want to leave the palace, then get out. I have no shortage of servants by my side. Servant. I knelt there, suddenly letting out a very soft laugh. Indeed, I am nothing but a servant. At the age of 10, my parents sold me for 5 taels of silver, and after passing through several hands, I entered the palace. I was lucky and was assigned to the Empress's palace. The Empress was very kind. Seeing that I was frail, she gave me the lightest task, keeping the Crown Prince company. Xiao Jingyuan was 5 years old at that time. I am 5 years older than him. Yet due to years of hunger, I look about his age. He is as proud as a little peacock and despises my clumsiness. But I like him very much because he always pretends to be impatient and tosses his leftover pastries to me. Those were the best pastries I have ever eaten. Later, the emperor suddenly passed away, and the empress voluntarily followed him in death. Prince Chang took the throne on the grounds that the crown prince was too young. Although Xiao Jingyuan remained the crown prince, his uncle had his own biological son. The palace servants were snobbish, and his situation grew increasingly perilous. When he was deposed and moved to Chonghua Palace, only I remained by his side. It was dilapidated, resembling a cold palace. There was a shortage of everything, from food and clothing to daily necessities. There was even a large hole in the window, which let in the draft at night and gave him a fever. The next night, I quietly got up and used my body to block the hole. I kept blocking it like that for a month, until Xiao Jingyuan, who had gotten up in the middle of the night, discovered me. At that time, Xiao Jingyuan, only 6 years old, held me with red-rimmed eyes. Sister Jiwei, one day I will surely let you live in the finest palace. Later, they went even further. The food they sent was actually spoiled. I argued with the palace servants delivering the food, but they punched and kicked me. They ground my fingers under their feet, sneering disdainfully. You should be grateful for spoiled food. If you dislike it, you won't even have that. Since then, I learned to be tactful. I tried to bribe them with my rations in exchange for some clean food, but my rations were too meager, and what I got in return was only enough for one person. I warmed the food against my chest and gave it all to Xiao Jingyuan, lying to him that I had already eaten. There was no charcoal fire in the winter. I wrapped all the clothes around him, holding him to warm him with my body heat. We curled up together like this, slowly surviving. Later on, his uncle's only son, who was frail, died young. Consequently, he was once again regarded as a thorn in their side. Those palace servants would beat and scold him at the slightest provocation, and I could only use my own frail body to shield him with my life. I myself do not know when affection began to take root. It was probably as Xiao Jingyuan gradually grew older. When the palace servants bullied us again, he no longer needed my protection, but could instead stand in front of me to shield me. He grew up to be a dashing figure, and he would no longer call me sister. On a rainy night, he kissed me. By then I was 18, and after years of struggling in the palace, I was no longer an innocent girl. I recognized the desire in the young man's eyes. I thought we were two vines, destined to tangle together in Chonghua Palace, which was like a cold palace, until death. Who knew that the path would take such a sudden turn? The emperor's health was failing, and the court officials repeatedly submitted memorials, urging the restoration of Xiao Jingyuan as crown prince. Naturally, the emperor was unwilling, but the fact remained that he had no son. Back then, Xiao Jingyuan leaned on me affectionately, his tone earnest. If I truly ascend the throne, I will surely make you empress and treat you well for the rest of your life. But in less than 2 years, the emperor suddenly passed away. Supported by his ministers, Xiao Jingyuan ascended the throne. He took me out of Chonghua Palace, looking at me with eyes full of guilt, and said, I have just ascended the throne, and the court is not yet stable. I fear I cannot make you empress. I said it didn't matter, and I didn't blame him. I was of humble birth to begin with, and had never imagined that I could become the most honored empress under heaven. Thus, Xiao Jingyuan conferred titles upon the empress, the noble consort, and the consorts, none other than the daughters of ministers who had supported his ascension to the throne. Back then, I thought that as long as I had his sincerity, that would be enough. But later, he said again, if you were made an imperial consort, I would still have to turn over a plaque to see you. I wish to see you every day. I looked into his eyes and lied to myself again. This deception lasted for 5 years. Now, I really can't keep deceiving him any longer. The time for palace maids to leave the palace is every 12th lunar month, which is still more than a month away. When Xiao Jingyuan returned from court, I was making the bed. He stood behind me and watched for a long time. Why not let the other palace attendants handle these trivial matters? My busy hands paused. Back in Chonghua Palace, the palace servants played pranks, deliberately placing snakes and insects in the bed, under the table, and anywhere else he might come into contact with. Xiao Jingyuan was so scared that he hid in my arms and cried his heart out. Xiao Jingyuan was so scared that he hid in my arms and cried his heart out. I was only a few years older than him, and I was shaking with fear myself. Yet I forced myself to use a stick to fish it out. And thereafter, regarding everything to do with him, I would certainly handle it personally. This habit has persisted to this day. Even though as the head palace maid, I have long since had no need to do such menial chores. Even though Xiao Jingyuan was now an emperor, no one dared to tease him anymore. Lost in thought, a warm body pressed against my back. Hot breath sprayed against her ear. Ji Wei, it seems it's been a long time since we last. Indeed, during the first 2 years after Xiao Jingyuan ascended the throne, he still relied heavily on me. At night, he could only sleep soundly lying by my side. Later on, he became more and more like an emperor, and he also acquired many beautiful concubines. The gentle haven smoothed away his shadows. So naturally, he no longer needed me. Most of the time, I just lay alone on the empty dragon bed in Jinhe Palace, wondering which concubine he favored today, and what he would like for lunch tomorrow. It could be said that Song Jiwei had always lived for Xiao Jingyuan. Now, I want to live differently. I lowered my eyes. Your Majesty, does this servant need to send someone to summon the noble consort or the virtuous consort? Xiao Jingyuan's caressing hand paused, his voice turning cold. Are you now unwilling to even let me touch you? I spun around and pulled myself out of his embrace. This slave is lowly and dares not defile the dragon's body. Xiao Jingyuan sneered. If you speak of defilement, it has already been done 1,000 times. Do you not think it is a bit late to say this now? I kowtowed. This slave is guilty. Xiao Jingyuan was furious. He grabbed the teacup at hand and raised it towards me. I subconsciously closed my eyes. A crisp shattering sound rang out, yet the sharp pain did not come. The teacup landed on the ground a few steps away from me. Get out! After taking my leave, I picked up my bundle, which had long been packed, from the corner of the side hall. I had only taken 2 steps when Xiao Jingyuan's flustered and exasperated voice came from behind me again. Where are you going? It is against palace rules for this servant to reside here to begin with. Now that I am about to leave the palace, it would be best to move out. Are you in such a hurry to leave us? Xiao Jingyuan's voice was so deep it could drip water. I didn't say a word. I turned around and withdrew. I didn't say a word. I turned around and withdrew. Before long, Chuyu brought back bad news. His Majesty has ordered that from now on, you need not attend in the inner chambers. You are only to sweep and clean. She looked worried, but I did not mind. I even comforted her in return. I was born into poverty, so I am not that delicate. Don't even mention sweeping. During those 10 years in Chonghua Palace, what hadn't I done just to survive? Overnight, the news that Jiwei, the head maid of Jinhe Palace, had fallen out of favor spread throughout the palace. When they saw me holding a broom and sweeping the courtyard, this news was completely confirmed. Before the midday meal, the noble consort arrived. Supported by the hand of a palace attendant, she stopped before me with an air of supreme elegance. Isn't this our head palace maid Jiwei? Why is she performing such menial labor as sweeping here? In reply to the noble consort, serving His Majesty is serving His Majesty. There is no distinction of high or low. My conduct was beyond reproach. The noble consort rolled her eyes, then turned and walked away. She hadn't taken more than a few steps when she let out a cry and nearly fell. Immediately, she turned around and scolded. You can't even handle such a trivial task? You nearly made me fall. What punishment do you deserve? I knew she did it on purpose. like all the consorts in this palace. She loathed me, for I held no title of consort, yet resided in Qianhe Palace, slept upon the dragon bed, and accompanied Xiao Jingyuan day after day. Someone, slap her mouth. Her maid said uneasily, "Your ladyship, this is Qianhe Palace after all, and she was once so favored." The noble consort turned her head to look at the calm palace doors. After all this commotion, the noise must have long since reached inside. If Xiao Jingyuan had intended to, he would have come out to stop it long ago. I smiled bitterly in silence, knelt down, and said, "This servant accepts the punishment." After 10 slaps on the mouth, both of my cheeks were numb. The imperial consort called a stop, ultimately not daring to go too far. "Stay here kneeling on your own to reflect on your mistakes." With that, she walked away with her head held high. Not long after, the emperor and the noble consort came out together. When his gaze fell on me, Xiao Jingyuan paused in his steps. The noble consort immediately felt somewhat uneasy. Yet he said nothing, walking straight past as if he hadn't seen me. The noble consort breathed a sigh of relief and resumed her haughty demeanor. "Without my command, you are not allowed to rise." Throughout the afternoon, whenever the palace attendants passed by me, they all lowered their heads and whispered amongst themselves, "Look, this is the consequence of harboring delusions of climbing the dragon and attaching to the phoenix." Yes, she doesn't even look at her own status, daring to vie for favor with the consorts. I knelt calmly, as if I hadn't heard. Over the years, I don't know how many times I've heard such words behind my back. I'm long used to it. Chuyu appeared out of nowhere and scolded them all away. One by one, she reached out to pull me up. Anyway, Her Highness the noble consort left long ago. Get up. I shook my head. The noble consort has indeed left. But everyone in this palace is her eyes. If I go against her today, tomorrow will only bring heavier punishment. Qiu naturally understood this as well. She sighed and had no choice but to rise and leave. Until night fell, news came that Xiao Jingyuan was staying overnight at the noble consort's palace. The lights in Qianhe Palace were extinguished, and soon, I was the only one left in the courtyard. This autumn is exceptionally cold. Yet it is only November, and the wind already cuts like a knife scraping against the bone. I am freezing, and my knees have long since ceased to feel like my own. Yet I still kneel perfectly straight. It's better that it's cold. The cold makes one sober. I don't know how much time passed, when suddenly the sound of footsteps came from behind. I sobered up a little and raised my head. Under the dim moonlight, Xiao Jingyuan's features were somewhat indistinct, and a faint scent of alcohol lingered around him. He half crouched down and reached out to stroke my face. Does it hurt? Of course it hurts. But I just shook my head. The master's reward is also a punishment, and the punishment is also a reward. Xiao Jingyuan frowned slightly. You are quite servile. I lowered my eyes and said nothing. Do you not hate? I do. But I know I lack deep scheming, nor do I have the perseverance to endure humiliation for the sake of revenge. I cannot contend with the noble-born consorts, let alone take revenge on Xiao Jingyuan, who possesses the world. All I can do is leave. If I can't afford to offend them, I can at least avoid them. Xiao Jingyuan withdrew his hand. Haven't you seen it clearly? In the past, everyone respected you. Even concubines below the rank of consort had to call you Gugu when they saw you. All of this was given to you by Zhen. Without my protection, you will find it difficult to take even a single step in the palace. Qi Wei, don't be so stubborn. As long as you do not leave the palace, I can immediately issue a decree to make you a consort. From now on, you can stay by my side openly and honorably. I looked at him and let out a very soft laugh. Openly and honorably? It seems he also knows that my former position was not justified. Yet he still kept me in such an awkward situation for 5 years. This slave is lowly. How dare I presume to occupy the position of a consort? If it were the past, I do not know how happy I would have been to hear these words. But I could see clearly that the emperor before me, clad in a dragon robe, was no longer the young boy who once relied on me. Xiao Jingyuan naturally detected the refusal in my words. His expression suddenly darkened, and before sweeping his sleeve and leaving, he coldly dropped a single remark. It seems indeed that I have spoiled you too much, indulging you until you do not know the height of heaven or the depth of the earth. Just listen to the noble consort and kneel here to reflect properly. Qinhe Palace was briefly lively due to his return, but soon returned to tranquility. The moon rose higher and higher, and a bone-chilling cold and drowsiness struck together. In his daze, a dark shadow seemed to appear before his eyes, followed by a wave of warmth spreading over his body. The dark shadow stood there for a long while, and seemed to whisper something softly. I wanted to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. My consciousness then sank into drowsiness. I had a dream. In the dream, Uncle Xiao Jingyuan's son did not die. He did not ascend the throne, did not have a harem of 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, and did not have throngs of servants. Throughout our lives, we relied on each other for survival within Chonghua Hall. That young man who would act spoiled and call me Sister Jiwei did not disappear. Unfortunately, dreams must eventually come to an end. I was awakened by the noisy footsteps around me. The Empress, the noble consort, and 2 other high-ranking consorts swept into Qinhe Palace in a grand procession. Behind them followed a group of imperial physicians, running and dripping with sweat. As the Empress passed by me, she stopped and frowned. What is going on? Why is she kneeling here? The noble consort's gaze fell upon me, and her expression instantly turned extremely unsightly. Following her gaze, I lowered my head, only to realize that I was draped in a cloak at some point. That soft fabric and smooth, glossy fur were clearly beyond the means of palace servants. The Empress said with understanding, "Jiwei, rise." The noble consort tried to intervene, but the Empress shot her a cold, expressionless glance. You still have the leisure to punish palace servants? The noble consort instantly fell silent and obediently followed the Empress into the hall. I slowly stood up, supporting my knees, which felt as if they had been pricked by needles, and my vision suddenly went black. After catching my breath for a moment, I called out to a palace maid who was hurriedly passing by with a wash basin. What has happened? Why have all the consorts come so early in the morning? The palace maid said impatiently. His Majesty suddenly developed a high fever early this morning. The consorts have come to attend to him during his illness. This is not something for a mere cleaning maid like you to question. I paused for a moment. He was perfectly fine yesterday. How could he suddenly develop a high fever? I subconsciously lowered my head and looked at the cloak I was wearing. Just then, the Empress's head maid suddenly hurried out. "Jiwei, quick! The Empress summons you." Before I could react, I was dragged by the hand and pulled inside. The sleeping chambers, heated by the floor dragons, were as warm as spring. The noble consort was sitting by the bed, sobbing softly. The Empress sat nearby with a frown and beckoned to me. "Come here quickly." Xiao Jingyuan lay on the bed clad only in a thin layer of clothing, his eyes tightly shut and his face flushed crimson. Only his lips moved, opening and closing, though it was unclear what he was saying. Only when I got closer could I hear clearly that he was calling a name. "Jiwei." The noble consort glared at me viciously. "It's all because you, this lowly maid, seduced His Majesty into returning to the palace in the middle of the night, that the dragon body has been harmed." The Empress frowned. "Enough. Stop being unreasonable. Jiwei, since His Majesty is calling for you, go." With the Empress having spoken, the noble consort had no choice but to rise reluctantly and make way. I pursed my lips and stepped forward as commanded. "What does your Majesty wish of this servant?" Xiao Jingyuan seemed to have recognized my voice and stopped calling my name repeatedly. I took the handkerchief handed to me by the palace attendant and placed it on his forehead. Just as I was about to withdraw, my hand was suddenly grabbed. Caught off guard, I fell onto the bed and was held tightly by Xiao Jingyuan. "Sister Jiwei, don't go. I feel so awful." That long unheard address left me dazed for a moment. But in the next instant, I felt the Guifei's murderous gaze piercing into my back. Then, the Empress's voice rang out. "You may all withdraw." With that, she led the way out. Though reluctant, the noble consort could only follow along. Only Xiao Jingyuan and I remained in the hall. He still kept his eyes tightly closed, showing no sign of waking. In a mere moment, he went from being drenched in sweat to trembling all over. Sister Jiwei, I'm cold. I'm so cold. I lowered my eyes to look at him, and in a trance, the stars shifted and the seasons changed, taking me back to that year in Chonghua Palace. Back then, he had a high fever, and just like this, he held me and cried out that he was cold. I wrapped all the clothes and bedding around him, then unfastened the few garments I had, using my body heat to warm him. For 2 full days and nights, I have not closed my eyes. But after 5 years in the deep palace, I am no longer the Jiwei of old. I struggled free of his hand and stood up. Deprived of the source of warmth, he curled up, shivering, with tears glistening at the corners of his eyes. Sister Jiwei, hug me. I just stood quietly by the bed, saying nothing, until a quarter of an hour later, he finally tired out and sank into a deep sleep again. I turned around and walked slowly away. Inside the outer hall, the Empress sat upright. Seeing me come out, she asked, "How is His Majesty?" I lowered my eyes. "In reply to your Majesty, he has fallen asleep." The Empress nodded, then suddenly said, "I reviewed the register of those leaving the palace this year, and your name is on it. Why? I have reached the proper age." That is likely just an excuse, isn't it? I raised my head and met the Empress's gaze, filled with pity. "Do you know why His Majesty has not conferred a consort title upon you?" I subconsciously asked. Why? Naturally, I didn't believe Xiao Jingyuan's reason, yet I pondered this question for a long time without an answer. Because His Majesty does not like having someone by his side who has seen all the wretchedness of his past. You are, and our Hongnong Yang clan is the same. I stood stunned for a long time before letting out a bitter laugh. I never could have imagined that this would be the answer. Those 10 years of relying on each other for survival turned out to be a wretched past in his eyes. My utmost devotion could not stand against the pride of an emperor. In that case, should I be thankful that I am still alive and well in this world? The Empress sighed. The Hongnong Yang clan supported him in ascending the throne, yet he remains wary and suppresses them. Had they not possessed such deep foundations, he would have long ago executed their entire clan. I looked up in surprise, catching a trace of hatred in her eyes. The Empress continued, "Yet he truly does care for you. Otherwise, he would not call your name even in his sleep. Even if you leave the palace, I fear he will not easily let you go." I didn't hesitate. I knelt down. "Please help me, Your Majesty." The Empress scrutinized me for a long while, and only after confirming my determination did she slowly nod. "Wait for my news." At that moment, a sound came from within the hall. The Empress glanced at me, stood up, and walked toward the inner chamber. A beaded curtain could not block out the sound. "Your Majesty, are you awake?" Xiao Jingyuan's voice sounded dazed. "I dreamt of Jiwei. Back then. Your Majesty, Jiwei is just outside the door. Shall this concubine summon her in?" The hall instantly fell silent. After a long while, Xiao Jingyuan's icy voice finally rang out. "I do not need someone whose heart is set on leaving me. Empress, you have spoken too much." I lowered my eyes and turned to leave without a sound. Since then, I continued to sweep and clean in Jinhe Palace daily as before. After Xiao Jingyuan's high fever broke, he also went to court as usual, and continued to favor his concubines as usual. Seeing me, they would just walk straight past without a sideways glance, until the days flowed by one after another. The day of leaving the palace was drawing near. I took a day off along with the others who were leaving the palace to pack my belongings. Over the years, I've managed to save up some private savings, planning to buy a small shop and start a little business once I leave the palace. Chiuyu folded my clothes for me, reluctant to part. "I really hate to see you go." I smiled at her and was about to speak when a flurry of hurried footsteps suddenly came from outside the door. The next moment, the door was abruptly pushed open. Xiao Jingyuan reeked of alcohol, swaying unsteadily as he leaned against the doorframe. with the pitch-black night behind him. Eunuch Lu gave an awkward, placating smile. Miss Ji Wei, His Majesty is drunk. He must have gone to the wrong place. But Xiao Jinyuan flung off his support. He pointed at Qiu Yu. You, get out. Qiu Yu naturally dared not disobey the order. She could only shoot me a look that said you're on your own before slipping away. Xiao Jinyuan stepped inside. Seeing this, Eunuch Lu had the good sense to close the door. Once again, only Xiao Jinyuan and I remained in the room. I sat by the bed, saying nothing. He approached slowly, his gaze falling on the half-packed bundle beside my hand. Then, he asked in a hoarse voice, "Are you really leaving?" I replied calmly, "His Majesty has already granted the servant's request. I was just throwing a tantrum. Couldn't you tell?" Xiao Jinyuan deliberately raised his voice, but he couldn't hide the sobbing in it. He staggered over to sit on the footstool, burying his head in my lap. Ji Wei, I won't let you go. We have relied on each other for 10 years, and swore to stay by each other's side forever. Have you forgotten all of that? I lowered my head. He was not wearing his magnificent crown today, his black hair draped over my legs. In countless evenings past, after I finished washing his hair, he would lie just like this on my lap to let it dry. How could I ever forget? Those were the bitterest, yet happiest, 10 years of my life. After a long while, I spoke softly. I have never forgotten it for a moment. And you, Your Majesty? Do you still remember those 10 years in Chonghua Palace? Xiao Jingyuan's back stiffened for a moment. Of course I remember. Is that so? Since Your Majesty remembers, why are you treating me this way? Xiao Jinyuan felt the dampness on his face and suddenly looked up. He frantically wiped away my tears. Ji Wei, don't cry. I didn't want to cry, but the tears only flowed faster the more he wiped them away. The grievances pent up for 5 years poured out the moment the question left my lips. Like a torrent. Impossible to stop. I was wrong. Xiao Jinyuan's eyes also reddened. Those 10 years were too wretched. You quarreled and fought with other palace attendants for my sake. Yet I was like a cripple, able only to hide behind you. I hated that useless, cowardly version of myself. He gripped my hand tightly. I am also afraid all the time. I am afraid that one day you won't be able to go on living in such a dark, hopeless existence, and you will leave me. I can only hold on to you desperately, holding on to you at all costs. I pulled my hand away from his. But the one who let go first was you, not me. That's not true. Xiao Jinyuan raised his voice and spoke incoherently. I never thought. Just as soon as I see you, I'm reminded of the days when we didn't have enough to eat. Every night I had nightmares, dreaming that all this was nothing but a fleeting dream before my death. Yet I can't bear to let you go. Ji Wei. Even though I had already heard it from the Empress once before, hearing him say it with my own ears, my chest still felt as if a large hole had been gouged out of it. So, you want me to remain your servant, bowing and scraping to you, so that you feel everything now is real. Is that it? I'm sorry. Ji Wei. I know I was wrong. Xiao Jinyuan gripped my shoulders. As long as you don't leave, I'll make you a noble consort. No. The Empress. I'll make you Empress. I'll issue the edict tomorrow. Just please don't leave. He really is drunk. What about Empress Yang? I can depose her for you. Hearing this, I felt not the slightest bit of joy. There was only a heart growing ever colder. Empress Yang had been married to him for 5 years, managing the harem and bearing him children. In the end, she held no place in his heart whatsoever, and was deposed and reinstated at his mere whim. When exactly did Xiao Jinyuan become this way? Can that lofty dragon throne truly twist a person into such an unrecognizable state? Or perhaps, from the very beginning, I had never truly seen him clearly? I remained silent for a long time. Xiao Jinyuan continued to ramble incoherently, until late into the night, when he succumbed to the effects of the alcohol and drowsiness and collapsed heavily onto the bed. He was still clutching tightly onto my sleeve. I watched him for a long while, then used scissors to cut off that section of the sleeve. Then I continued to finish packing the bundle. At dawn, I picked up the bundle and headed out. Eunuch Lu was dozing cross-legged at the door. Hearing the noise, he hurriedly got up. His gaze fell on my bundle, and he hurriedly said, "Miss Ji Wei, are you still leaving?" "But His Majesty." I interrupted him. "Little Lu, if you still remember the kindness I've shown you, do not stop me." Eunuch Lu instantly fell silent. Back then, after Uncle Xiao Jingyuan fell gravely ill, our circumstances improved considerably. At that time, little Lu had just entered the palace and was being bullied by everyone. I took pity on him and brought him to Xiao Jingyuan's side. Without me, he never would have become this chief eunuch. After a long while, he silently took a step back. "You'd better leave as soon as possible, if His Majesty wakes up." He didn't finish his sentence, but I understood what he meant. I nodded. "Thank you." The palace staff leaving the palace gathered at Shida Gate. A eunuch hurried past on the road and accidentally bumped into me. "Her Majesty has already made the arrangements outside the palace." And then, before attracting the attention of others, we went our separate ways to different corners. At the third watch of the hour of the tiger, the palace gates slowly opened. A biting wind blew against my face, mingled with the faint sound of commotion. It was the scent of freedom. I followed the excited palace attendants as they hurried toward the outside. After stepping through the main gate, I looked back. The majestic imperial city loomed like a colossal beast in the dawn. The wide-open gates were its gaping maw, ready to swallow people whole. Fortunately, I would never have to return. When Xiao Jingyuan woke up, he felt as though his head were splitting. He subconsciously called Ji Wei's name, waiting for her to bring him warm water to rinse his mouth as usual, and then gently help him change his clothes. For the past 5 years, this was how they had lived. But this time, there was no response for a long while. Then Xiao Jingyuan remembered that Ji Wei had been giving him the cold shoulder lately. He wanted to rub his aching brow, but as he raised his hand, a piece of blue cloth drifted onto his face. Xiao Jingyuan clenched the blue cloth, and suddenly his entire body stiffened. Fragments of last night's memories flooded into his mind, and he abruptly sat up. "Someone!" Eunuch Lu pushed the door open and entered. He asked, "Where is she?" Eunuch Lu feigned ignorance. "Your Majesty is asking about whom? It is already time for the morning court session." "Why not? Cut the crap! Where is Song Ji Wei?" Seeing that he could no longer bluff, Eunuch Lu had no choice but to tell the truth. "Your Majesty, today is the day palace servants are released from the palace. Miss Ji Wei has likely already left." As the words fell, the room instantly fell into a deathly silence. Eunuch Lu knelt in terror, bracing himself for an onslaught of rage. Yet, after a long while, only Xiao Jingyuan's hoarse voice rang out. "Find out where she went for Jin. Jin will personally go and bring her back." Half an hour later, a low-profile carriage sped away from the imperial city under the escort of 10 silver-armored guards. Xiao Jingyuan sat in the carriage, clutching the green cloth in one hand while incessantly rubbing his temples with the other. His countenance looked ghastly, a result of the hangover coupled with the jolting of the carriage. After traveling swiftly for another half hour, the surrounding houses and signs of human habitation gradually dwindled. The outskirts of the capital have been reached. The guard examined the ruts on the road and reported. They headed southwest towards the Wei River. Xiao Jingyuan's low voice rang out with just a single word: "Chase." Moments later, a shabby carriage appeared in everyone's line of sight. The guard shouted loudly, "The Imperial Guard is here. Who goes ahead? Dismount and submit to inspection." Xiao Jingyuan swept aside the curtain and stepped onto the carriage shaft. A woman in green leaned out from the carriage ahead, glanced back, and immediately shrank back inside. Instead of slowing down, that carriage actually quickened its pace. Xiao Jingyuan clenched the green cloth in his hand, his eyes fixed intently on that familiar silhouette. "Ji Wei, every word I said last night stands true. Come back with me." The carriage ahead showed no reaction. Xiao Jingyuan pleaded for a while, gradually growing agitated. "Song Ji Wei, as long as you return now, I can let bygones be bygones." If you defy the edict again, I will certainly not let you off lightly. Naturally, the humble carriage could not compare to the imperial carriage. In the time it takes for a quarter of an hour, the gap between the two vehicles narrowed significantly. Seeing the distance growing ever closer, the person driving that carriage was clearly flustered and losing all sense of direction. And just a few steps away lay the Wei River. Seeing this, the guard frowned and reminded him, "Your Majesty, something is not right." As soon as his words fell, the sound of a horse neighing suddenly came from ahead. The next moment, that carriage suddenly lost control and charged straight towards the Wei River. The instant the carriage entered the water, everyone instinctively looked towards Xiao Jingyuan. His face was deathly pale, as if he were no longer among the living, as he stared blankly at the churning water surface. After a long while, he suddenly let out a heart-rending roar. "Ji Wei!" By the time they reached the spot where the person had fallen into the water, Xiao Jingyuan almost tumbled out of the carriage. He stumbled to the riverside, only to be stopped by the guards. "Why are you stopping me? All of you, go down and fish them out." The guards received the order and went down into the river. But after half an hour, aside from hauling up a few broken planks, they found nothing. Xiao Jingyuan's complexion grew increasingly grim. With tears streaming down his face, Eunuch Lu advised, "Your Majesty, it is now the autumn flood season, and it has been raining continuously for half a month. Having fallen into the water in these circumstances, I fear it is." Xiao Jingyuan acted as if he had not heard, staring fixedly at the river's surface. After a long while, he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, before falling into a coma. He left only one instruction: mobilize all the Jinui. If alive, bring him to me. If dead, bring back the body. 3 days later, the Jinui retrieved 2 bloated and unrecognizable corpses from the lower reaches of the Wei River. One of the male corpses was dressed as a groom and was buried on the spot. The other female corpse was urgently rushed to the imperial palace. Xiao Jingyuan stumbled into the side hall of Qinhe Palace, leaving even Eunuch Lu shut outside. Trembling, he lifted the white cloth covering the corpse. Upon seeing the familiar green robe and the sole intact wooden hairpin in her hair, he suddenly sank to his knees. It was the one he had personally carved for his Jiwei Jijia when he was 14. After a long while, a heart-wrenching wail finally echoed from within the tightly closed palace gates. Not far from the foot of the imperial city, a small needlework shop quietly opened its doors. The owner was a solitary young woman, wearing her hair in a matron's bun, yet no husband was to be seen. Only after getting to know her a little did the neighbors learn that she was a widow who had suffered the misfortune of losing her husband. Consequently, everyone flocked to patronize her business, making the small needlework shop thrive. In this way, more than a month passed. Late one night, a group of people quietly knocked on the door of the shop's rear courtyard. Under the moonlight, the Empress's dignified face was half hidden beneath a hood. "Ji Wei, do you know why I have come to find you?" I sighed inwardly and said respectfully, "This servant does not know." The Empress seemed to smile. "You are no longer a palace maid. There is no need to refer to yourself as a servant." I readily complied. "Yes." This commoner obeys. The Empress asked, "Do you know of His Majesty's recent condition?" "Your ladyship wishes to speak." This humble woman is all ears. "Ever since your corpse was sent to the palace, His Majesty has fallen gravely ill. His physical health has plummeted, his mind is in a trance, and all day long in Qinhe Palace, he stares blankly while holding your old clothes." I thought for a moment and said, "Those 2 corpses, just 2 death row inmates." The Empress was somewhat surprised. "Do you really not care about His Majesty at all?" As she spoke, she looked somewhat wistful. "I have been his wife for 5 years. Yet I have never seen him look like this for anyone." I lowered my eyes and said softly, "Is this not exactly what her ladyship wishes to see?" As the words fell, silence filled the courtyard. After a long while, the Empress gave a soft laugh. "You are indeed a clever person. Indeed, if that were all, I should be very pleased." She changed the subject. "However, the governor of Jiangxi, having heard of His Majesty's illness, specially sought out a beauty to send to the palace. Do you know what that beauty looks like? I shook my head. She bears a striking resemblance to you. His Majesty was captivated the moment he saw her and immediately appointed her imperial noble consort. Imperial noble consort, just one step away from the Empress. I have even heard that His Majesty has entertained the thought of deposing the Empress to install her in her place. Qi Wei, do you have any regrets? If you hadn't left, all of this would surely have been yours. I paused for a moment, then suddenly laughed. The Empress frowned. What are you laughing at? I suppressed my smile. Your ladyship need not test me. Qi Wei is already dead. The only one living in this world is the widowed lady Song. Whatever her ladyship wishes to do has nothing to do with me. The Empress paused for a moment. It was only then that I saw clearly that her fingers under her hood were trembling slightly. That a woman of the noble Yang clan could be frightened. What she intended to do seemed all but obvious. After a long while, the Empress dropped a single remark and turned to leave. Tomorrow you shall leave the capital. The farther you go, the better. Early the next morning, when the neighbor got up, Madame Song's small courtyard was already empty. A month later, a dusty young woman disembarked at a wharf in Jiangnan. In the inn, diners were talking loudly while drinking heavily. Have you heard? Something big happened in the capital. Who doesn't know yet? His Majesty has abdicated. TSK. His Majesty seems to be only 20, in the prime of his life. Why would he abdicate for no reason? I heard that His Majesty lost his mind, doted on a wicked concubine, and wanted to depose the Empress without cause, which angered the Empress's natal family, the Hongnong Yang clan. The Grand Preceptor contacted more than half the court officials to impeach His Majesty, ultimately forcing His Majesty to abdicate in favor of the eldest prince born to the Empress. I heard the eldest prince is only 3 years old. Indeed, the Empress is ruling from behind the curtain. Then what about His Majesty? He is still so young. A diner pointed to his head and whispered in a low voice. Sigh. My niece works in the palace. I heard something is wrong with His Majesty here. He's gone mad. The Empress is benevolent. Yet he wanted to depose her. The Empress still ordered people to take good care of him and even had a palace rebuilt for him. What was it called again? Oh right. Chonghua Hall. Beside the counter, the shopkeeper urged, Madam, are you staying the night or just having a meal? The woman came back to her senses and said calmly, Staying the night.